according to everybody, right? They're doing something socially just. They're making a ton of money, and then they have no repercussions even when they screw up. I mean, if you're into making money and you have a low moral standards, that's a great industry to get into right now because it's so booming. We're now not supposed to be using it on pedophiles because the ACLU says it's cruel and unusual punishment. But in the same token, they're advocating for its use on children in multiple states in America. And now they're open to being abused sexually now by predators.
Hallo zusammen zu einer neuen Ausgabe von USA Report und heute sprechen wir über das Musikvideo von Dylan Mulvaney und das Interessante über dieses Musikvideo ist, Dylan Mulvaney ist transsexuell und er kopiert eine sehr, sehr junge Frau und ihm ist wichtig, dass er alle Stadien der Girlshood, des Mädchenseins durchmachen kann, weil er natürlich erst gestartet hat mit seiner Transition und mit seiner Umwandlung. Und wir müssen natürlich auch bedenken, dass Dylan in seinen Mitte 30ern ist und man sollte natürlich auch in diesem Alter, das ist meine Meinung, seine Umwandlung haben. Und ich spreche mit David Kitsak. Er ist von Gays Against Groomers, von der Organisation, die Grooming und schädliche Woke-Agenda verurteilen und auch dagegen steuern möchten und eine richtige Aufklärung betreiben wollen. Und in diesem Interview ist es sehr interessant zu sehen, was er darüber denkt, wie Dylan Mulvaney sich gibt und inwiefern sich das auch auf die Follower von Dylan aus. Hello, David. Thank you for having you on our show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have you again on our show because we had such a great conversation on Turning Point. And today I want to ask you about this interesting music video of Dylan Mulvaney. So what do you think about, what does it, when you watch this video, what does it do with you? Because it does different things to me because I'm a woman. I went to girlhood. Like, I did everything. I'm now 36 years old. And I was, to be honest, a little bit shocked that he's actually bringing that out.
Yeah. I mean, the immediate elephant in the room is why a 30-something-year-old actor is talking about girlhood. Like, shouldn't you be wanting to be a woman, maybe, or whatever that is? So it's just odd. And there's always like a childlike theme there's always been a kind of childlike theme through his content. Even the way he speaks, it was clearly geared more towards young people. And then the aesthetics of it, like how it's set up, like we were talking about, it's basically themed as like high school girl type vibe. It's very Clueless or Mean Girls kind of vibe. So that's just, you know, a little strange, raises questions, raises eyebrows. Why? I know the explanation, like we brought up before, is that he thinks it's like he can't just become a woman since he's just starting out to be a woman. So obviously he's a girl, and that's why he said he's a girl, so that he becomes a woman later. That's silly because it's weird in two ways. A, that's like saying that you want to like go through everything that girls go through. You know what I mean? To like become a girl, like what, you're never going to have your first period. You're never going to have like your first girl sleepover. You're never going to have your first like elementary crush. You're never going to have like a boy bully you as a young girl because he likes you or something, you know, like all the little nuances that come with growing up as a boy or growing up as a girl. You're never going to experience that unless you are that. So maybe just focus on the woman's side of it. But there is like this weird attachment to childlike aesthetics. Everything is very like baby colored. And that's kind of popular now, but still that's been his theme from the beginning, even before. That's like what made him famous because it became so controversial. And like he's wearing pigtails in the thing the whole time, which is like not to be what's it called, like gross, but that's like, I was watching this interview about MindGeek, the parent company of Pornhub, you know, and they said that that's like the first thing they use to make people look young in pornographies, is because that's like typically a younger kid hairstyle. So it's like there's all these visual cues about stuff that's like, it's like you're presenting a very innocent kind of picture, but then once we get into the lyrics and what days of girlhood mean to her, like the actual days. So it's Monday, can't get out of bed. So you're mentally ill. Tuesday, which, listen, relatable. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but so Monday, can't get out of bed. Tuesday, you're picking out your meds. Wednesday, you're going on a shopping spree. And then Thursday, you go home with someone. You don't even remember where you were or remember who you slept with.
Yeah.
So it's like we have promiscuity, medication use for mental health, for mental illness, drug use likely because she's saying she can't remember where she was, heavy drinking, whatever. So all of these things, they're kind of adult themes, but you're packaging them in like a kid package. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And what's kind of dangerous about Dylan Mulvaney, I actually did a TikTok live about this with just some random people I saw talking about it, was that his audience, or their audience, whatever, I'm not trying to be mean, honestly, their audience is young people primarily. That's how Dylan grew so much, because they specifically targeted young people. And then there's this common trope of just kind of like growing your audience in an innocent way and growing them because children are like considered like the best consumers. Like you want children to want to buy your product or, you know, watch your show because they're, you know, like they'll make their parents do it and all of that. So they're the best consumers you can get. So you're growing that audience base and that customer base, if we're going to be honest, because he markets to them constantly and sells them stuff constantly. In an innocent way. But then once you have that captured audience, then you start going into more controversial subjects. You get very sexually explicit. You start talking about drug use or promiscuity or whatever the case may be. So I think that's what's dangerous about it. This isn't really about people hating on Dylan. It's about the reach of his platform and who his audience is, you know, and the effect that he could have on it. And I've seen plenty of trans folks who are more so classic kind of binary trans, you know, who they don't believe that they are want to get into all of women's spaces and are basically just 1,000% women. They want to be treated as women, kind of, you know, in life. They would like to present as women, sure. And they try their hardest to look like the opposite sex, right? They're not like, you know, beard and lipstick saying, I'm ma'am, you know? So a lot of them will say Dylan is a horrible example for what being trans is, or being trans in America is. First of all, he's extremely privileged. He's had companies and doctors and surgeons throwing themselves at him, wanting to make him over so they can advertise their work, you know, because he has such a huge platform. And not just because of that, also, even though Dylan is constantly selling things to everybody, it's also like masked in like a virtue, like you're doing something good by supporting him, right? So it's like you're doing something so good by supporting Dylan because he's this oppressed girl as a 30-something-year-old adult, which is silly. But so they're advertising to this audience, and but they're masking it in virtue. So it's like it's commodified, basically. He kind of represents the corporatization of like trans identity. And like, not everyone's going to have that same privilege. If we're going to look at it from the left, right? Dylan went and had the FFS, facial feminization surgery. The doctor did a great job, of course. That probably cost like $200-something thousand to do. It's like 7 different surgeries. They remake your entire face. They get rid of, you know, they raise your brows, they narrow your bone, they shave down your brow bone, they shave down your chin, your nose, everything, because there's so many micro features that make women and men different, you know? So, and they're like, it's completely unfair. Dylan was trans for 6 months and was invited to the White House to interview Joe Biden. Can you imagine that? Like, that's so insane. In 2021, Joe Biden only interviewed like 1 or 2 people within 2 years of like the election year. You know, he was hiding the whole time. And one of those 2 people was Dylan Mulvaney, and the other one was Cardi B. So it's just like goes to show you how they're trying to use like popularity and social media to push influence on young people. But that's a crazy, even if you believe Dylan Mulvaney is fully trans and everything, they've been trans for 6 months and you invite them to the White House to talk about trans issues. Like, that's so asinine. It's it's insulting. If I was trans, I would be insulted by that, you know? It's like crazy, especially the people that had to live through like the 90s and the 2000s maybe, and it wasn't just like, oh, you're coming out and everybody loves you right away. So I think in general, I think the video is insulting to women and trans people alike. I think it's cheesy. I think like good for you on the style and the makeup, and some of the wigs are horrible in it. So I was disappointed with that. I thought there would be better wigs because Dylan has the money. So, but overall, yeah, I would say like insulting would be a good word for everybody all around. I mean, how do you feel about it as a woman looking at that?
I was shocked because I was thinking, what do people actually think a girlhood is? What a girl goes through in her girlhood? Because, okay, I'm from Germany, so I probably had a different girlhood than American high school girls, but it's still like, no, I didn't had every Monday a bad day, and I obviously didn't had Tuesdays to pick up my medication. Not that I want to insult someone or offend someone that they do that, but putting that as a general topic and as a statement, yeah, that's how it should be. I think it's very dangerous because that's what you mentioned. He has a very young audience, and they see him maybe as a role model. And when they see this 3 minutes video, they think, okay, maybe that's normal that I sexualize myself that easy and that early. And I think that's very dangerous, even for girls who want to stay girls, or also for boys who are transsexual and they want to do the first steps. And then they say, okay, I have to literally sell my body to be very close to him because he is the role model. I think that's very, very dangerous. And what you also mentioned is, do you think with the advertisement that a lot of companies use him a stage model, or even Bud Light, they had him on the beer advertisements, and then you said that he was one of the last people President Biden invited to the White House. So do you think that his role is not only for, okay, we tolerate transgender? No, it's actually big tech, big pharma, woke ideology at all is using him for putting the agenda into the heads of the young people?
1,000%. Because also we have to think about it this way. So Dylan went to the most prestigious doctors in the world. Obviously, they're not going to screw up his face. It's too important. You know, they need to show a good product. And Dylan brought in a picture of Audrey Hepburn and said, you know, make me Audrey Hepburn. And they did a good job. Listen, I'm not going to lie. They did a good job. Dylan looks much more feminine now, as you would expect when you shave off half your face and inject things into it to resemble a natural woman, you know? But what that'll do now, it's become such a booming industry, you know, that this is going to encourage young people to think that they'll have the same result, or that they should do it as young as possible so that their faces don't develop and they don't have the masculine jaw or something. And then they can go, since it's become such a booming industry, there's many people that have gotten into this industry to make money now, and they may not be the best. So you might think you're going to a great doctor, you're going to a chop shop, and all of these surgeries are experimental, especially when it comes to like sexual reassignment and all of that. Obviously, the cosmetic procedure is less experimental, but anything to do with your gender and surgeries, you're signing away a waiver. You can't sue them. Since it's all experimental, you have no rights, right? So it's such a win-win for the people involved. Like, they get to do whatever they want. They're doing something good socially, according to everybody, right? By chopping all of these young people and cutting off healthy body parts. They're doing something socially just. They're making a ton of money, and then they have no repercussions even when they screw up. I mean, if you're into making money and you have a low moral standards, that's a great industry to get into right now because it's so booming. And the other side of that, pharmaceutical industries, like you mentioned, for example, Lupron, right? That drug, that's a chemical castration agent. We use it on pedophiles. We're now not supposed to be using it on pedophiles because the ACLU says it's cruel and unusual punishment. But in the same token, they're advocating for its use on children in multiple states in America. So states that are trying to ban Lupron on the use of children, the ACLU is coming in and suing them, saying you have no right, give the drugs to these kids. And then in the same breath, they're saying, no, don't give this dangerous drug to pedophiles because it's too cruel and unusual punishment. It hurts their bodies too much. I mean, think about that. But then I was thinking in a very cynical American capitalistic way, if you're a pharmaceutical company that now is not going to be using your drug in prisons anymore across the country, and you still have this drug, or you still want to continue making this drug and making a profit from it, the best thing you can imagine is that a bunch of little kids start getting put on it by their parents, because there's an endless supply of children coming up and growing up and getting confused into this ideology. Now you have a booming customer base, you know, of people wanting this chemical castration agent we used to use on pedophiles, and now we think is good medical practice on children. I mean, it's so backwards. And like, you know, I used to say we live in like a clown world, and now I say we live in an evil clown world, or like a demon clown world, because it's just so evil and inverted and backwards and the opposite of what it should be, that you have to think it's intentional at this point. It's not just random, right? Like, there's too much changing too fast all at once and all headed in one direction, you know? So, oh, and I made a little joke about Dylan, because they, in the song, they talks about, you know, Thursday, walk of shame. I can't remember his name, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, Dylan, it's not a girlhood experience. It's if you met your walk of shame on Grindr, okay? We know where you met your walk of shame. It's a gay dating app. You didn't meet them on anywhere else. So quit pretending that's a girl thing. That's quite a bit gay bottom thing. So that's just true.
Yeah, but he has to play the role. So he probably puts Tinder then on the marker then. Because...
Oh yeah, and then just says he's a girl. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we can.
And what you mentioned with the corporations and the sponsorships and all of that, like the businesses going into it, that's also much more top down than we realize. It goes all the way up to the banks. Like, the banks won't loan the money to these billion-dollar corporations unless they fit their ESG score, environmental social governance. So, and LGBT is a part of that. So that's important to note, that this isn't happening from like a grassroots level. This is all happening from the top down.
So it's actually a money-making machine on the backs of people who are not happy in their bodies and just to find their happiness, and children who are confused and don't even know what they want. Because I don't know if a 10-year-old girl or boy already know if they really want to be a girl or a boy, and then change it. And then you just hear the teachers or the doctors, yeah, I'm going to give you that pill, and that changes your whole hormone status. That's crazy.
It is, especially considering that, like, I would be one of those kids easily if I had like different parents and I was raised today. If I was raised today with the same parents, I wouldn't, because they're Russian, so they would just like smack it out of me, you know? They'd be like, what the hell is wrong with you? But other times, of course, when I was like a young boy, I related more. I liked the pink Power Ranger. I wanted to be Kimberly. She was my favorite of the Power Rangers, besides the white one. The white one and the pink one were my favorites. And I related more with girls. I had more girlfriends. I was way more sensitive. I was like nervous around boys. I felt like they were like a different, almost like so different than me, you know, that I was like, oh my God, maybe I should have been a girl. Of course, you think that when you're a kid, because the world is kind of so simple to you when you don't realize that you can be any kind of a boy. You can be a more like, I forget her name, but she's incredible. She's like a researcher who said she studies gender and all this. And she said she's not even using the term effeminate boys anymore, because they're not effeminate. They're just a different kind of masculinity. So it's a spectrum of masculinity. Not all masculinity is just like rah lifting weights, like punching people, you know? Some masculinity is being a freaking like neurophysicist and being a nerd or something, or some masculinity is like writing, or some, you know, it's different. It could be, it's to each person is what it is, you know? So it's, I think that's important. And that kind of goes back to what, you were saying about like, do people really think that's what girls are? You know, like, is that the perception of like girlhood outside of being when you're a girl? And I think that it's a childlike perception. It really is. And that's kind of what Dylan plays into, is that it's like this childlike perception that all girls are like, you know, sitting on their bed on their phones, twirling their hair, and then like crying, and then like buying skirts and dancing. You know, it's just like, it's like what a kid would think. Yeah. And so we're projecting that onto everybody as like fact. So it's just, yeah, Dylan has a weird, has something weird going on with like wanting to be viewed so childlike. There's something strange with that for sure.
So, because sometimes people connect or try to connect the dots with wokeness and pedophilia, that they want to sensitize the parents or even the society that sexualization in a young age is totally normal, and having sex or teaching children sex positions in the elementary school. So do you think that Dylan a little bit plays in this game with it? Because like you said, he's a 30-something guy, thinks he is female. So why doesn't he just be 30-something woman? Because I'm 36. Like, we're not that bad in our mid-30s. So you don't have to pretend to be a high school girl when you are 36 or something, because that's crazy.
It's weird. It's creepy. Yeah. I don't think maybe advertently he is, you know, because I don't think, honestly, I don't think Dylan is nefarious or anything. I don't think he's even like intentionally trying to like brainwash kids necessarily. Dylan, so, and again, if anyone's watching this that gets offended that I'm misgendering Dylan, I truly don't mean to. I just can't bring myself to keep saying she, and I'm just going to say Dylan now. I'm really, really not trying to be offensive, I swear. But Dylan, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. See, that's literally what this gender crap does to you. When you have to like trip over your words and think about what you're calling somebody without just like saying what you want to say, it literally makes you dumber. It makes you dumber because you can't like articulate things as you should be articulating them. Oh, but basically what I was saying is that Dylan, I think, is kind of like a useful idiot, you know, like this agenda has been going on through academia. He's gotten, so I don't know, I can't say he's totally innocent though, because Dylan has connected with, do you know Alok Vokman? He's like the Indian man who always has like a beard kind of, but wears like dresses and lipstick and the hair. He's the one that said little girls are kinky and sexual. Oh, he said that. That's a direct quote from his Facebook before he could delete it. He said, you know, there's this idea that little girls are just innocent little doves, and it's not true. Little girls are adventurous. They're wild. They can be mean. They can be kinky. Like, you're an adult man saying little girls are kinky. So Dylan attached to that person, which Alok would be a really good, like, we could do a whole 2-hour special about that person. He is dangerous. And wherever he goes, this gender ideology poison spreads. Sam Smith, you remember, Sam Smith, right? The singer Brit that got all crazy. Yeah. Sam Smith was more normal before he met Alok. After he met Alok, that's when he started changing his pronouns, dressing all crazy, getting into the devil stuff. Like, Alok does that. Like, Alok will, Demi Lovato, same thing. Met Alok, started attaching to Alok, became friends with Alok, changed her pronouns to Demi Lovato now. All of these things. So Alok is poisonous, and he's very intelligent, and he's very eloquent. Like, he knows how to speak. He's very intelligent, but he has completely poisonous ideas. He is, I would say, the closest thing to like a French postmodernist from like the 70s as possible, where like they truly believe that kids needed to be sexually liberated, that they believe that children were a oppressed class, just like women, and gays, that needed to be sexually liberated. So that's where it's headed. Like, they say this very plainly. They believe it's oppressive to deny child sexuality. And that's where the argument's going to be moving forward, because we've already said that it's okay for a 12-year-old to decide what sex they are. What's to stop them from deciding to have sex at that point with an adult? You know, there is no logical reason to stop that. If you believe that a 12-year-old can change their sex, how do you believe that they can't have sex too? You know? So that's where it's going. And which obviously I disagree with both of those things. We all do. If you have a heart and a brain, like, you know, a child is a child. And as much as it is about their bodies developing, it's about their minds too. You know, it's about that you don't want to like pervert or corrupt somebody's mind.
Do you think that this, what you said, evil behavior influences a lot of other artists? And this is not only stopping with the artist, it's going to involve or have any types of changing the audience too. So this is actually a very, very dangerous movement here.
Yeah, because it's, like you said, it's not just in, you know, music or artists or anything. This is in corporations, it's in academia where it kind of originated, and all of the worst ideas always originate in academia and the halls of university when very, very privileged people have nothing else to worry about. So they create problems for the rest of us. That's basically what academia is, outside of like the hard sciences, obviously. But so yeah, I mean, it does have the capability of spreading. I think it also just kind of like normalizes. We've kind of, it's interesting. There's been like this trend of in all of media, and especially in kids shows, of like seeing the point of view of the villain. So like, oh, who you thought was evil really isn't evil anymore. Or let's see, like Maleficent kind of started that with the Angelina Jolie like 10 or 12 years ago. And then there's like this huge explosion of, they even have a little kids show called Descendants, which is about the little kids of all the Disney villains. They all go to high school together and they're like all villains. So it's always, there's like been this general theme of inversion for like the last like 10 or 20 years. It's become like very popularized, of just being like, oh, maybe who you thought was the villain isn't the villain. It's essentially like, it's a little like Luciferian, basically, like being like, no, they're just rebellious, or they just want like freedom, or they just want to live their own life. And you're trying, the people that want to control or have any rules, they're the actual evil, oppressive ones. And that kind of correlates all the way down, whether we're talking about race, sex, sexuality, trans issues, Israel, Palestine, whatever the case may be. It's always trying to be looked at from a lens of oppressed and oppressor, and then the oppressor is always whatever is normal. So normalcy is oppressive. So any sort of norms, that's again what the French postmodernists believed, is that any normalcy, it's not, they kind of argue that they weren't necessarily pro-pedophilia, they were just anti-norm. So anything that we were taught before is bad, experiment with it and enjoy it because there are no rules, basically. So that's even more dangerous, right? That's even more dangerous, because if someone flatly comes out and says, I am pro-pedophile, that's not going to get any traction. People are going to be like, you're disgusting, you're weird, we'll stop listening to you now. But if a person says, you know, there's research to show that children's sexuality develops much earlier than puberty, and it's actually oppressive to keep that from them, and it prevents their mind from developing and all that. If it's shown from a perception of oppressed and oppressor, then the kids become the oppressed and the parents are the oppressor, right? So then the teachers have to come in, or these influencers have to come in and liberate the children from their family and from their parents and from the traditions and the norms. So it's this very serpentine relationship. It really is. It's the snake coming down from the tree being like, oh, really? Your parents are telling you this? They think that's good for you? Oh, no, they just don't want you to know all of these amazing things and have all of this freedom and blah, blah, blah. And the worst part of, or one of the worst parts about that, is that that is an environment that is ripe for predators, because predators can come in and say, yeah, your parents don't understand you. Wow, you are so mature for your age. No, you're different than all the other kids. No, but you know, it's just like a perfect setup for that. And we can't be naive anymore about that. Like, we live in a post-Epstein, post-Weinstein world now, you know, where we have to be aware and very, very cognizant of what the hell is going on. And we can't like ascribe innocence to things by giving them just the benefit of the doubt. No, there are perverts and predators out there that are looking for cracks in a child's family life, or looking for cracks in a child's identity or self-esteem. And we're literally teaching an entire generation of kids that they're now born in the wrong body. Their parents aren't going to accept them. Like, it is so scary because we're literally just opening up the floodgates for all of these children to be abused more so than they've already been abused by the medical establishment, their teachers that are even putting them down this track, right? So then they're being abused ideologically, they're being abused medically, and now they're open to being abused sexually now by predators because it literally turns my stomach even thinking about some of the things I saw on Twitter, specifically the comments there. And that's why I'm like, don't share any pictures of your kids online, period. Even if you think it's innocent, like it creeps me out because they're completely innocent pictures, and perverts and pedophiles, hundreds of comments under it saying disgustingly sexual things about children. None of the comments are deleted, flagged, nothing, and if it's bad now, it was way worse before Elon, because Elon actually had a crackdown on all of this stuff before on Twitter, because I've seen the actual verbiage of it, because I've reported so much stuff on Twitter. I've reported gross things that I've seen and gross people. I report so many things now, because if it's anything to do with like kids, obviously I don't even think twice about it. But so there, it used to be a lot looser. So you obviously couldn't share explicit sexual material online of children. Now you can't even speak sexually about children in an explicit way. Like, good, that's how it should be online. Like, yeah. Yes, we should moderate that freaking speech. I'm sorry, that's disgusting, especially because that's like dangerous and abusive, But before it wasn't like that. So people are celebrating the fact that children are overly sexualized now. These predators are literally celebrating this online. They're like, these 18-year-olds come out to the adult world with 10 different kinks already. They have fetishes. They've already done bondage. They've already know all about all of these very, very like adult, dark, not even regular sex themes, like dark sex things, kink, fetish, taboos, all of that. That's already all there, because if you're introducing pornography to children at 10, 12, 11, 12, 13 years old, they can't watch the same porn they did when they're 14. They have to start watching harder and harder things. Yeah. And eventually that goes down very few paths. It's bestiality, pedophilia, rape, or oh my God, what's it called? Snuffing, like killing people, So it goes to like the darkest extremes. And that's kind of like normalized now. Like, even if you see what they've introduced into classes and sex ed classes, again, they're not just talking about condoms and contraception and stuff. They're introducing anal beads, dildos, like bondage stuff, it's
and oral sex. It's crazy. Like, I had sexual education when I was 15 at school, and what we learned was, okay, how to create a baby, but didn't went into detail how to do it. We just know, okay, if this happens, in 9 months later, you have a baby and you have a greater job then. But it's not like that. We have now to read, or that children has to read all how that works. Like, I saw some books in the libraries where I said, okay, that's like hentai or something, like sexual comics, where I say, okay, they should not be allowed under 18. Like, crazy.
And there's one, I don't know, it's probably the same one you're referring to. It's either like This Book is Gay, or there's a couple different books where they have like the pictures of it, right? Like the cartoons of it. And there was one that was extra disturbing. So it's describing anal sex. Wonderful. Why do children need to be learning about that? But it's describing anal sex, and the people engaging in it, it's so clearly someone who is older and someone that is younger. Very, very clearly. Like, the man laying down is bald, okay, has body hair and looks like bigger and thicker. And then the person on top of him, no body hair, no facial hair, short hair, like hair on their head, look twinkish, looks very young. So it's like you're already very subversively introducing these concepts of like cross-generational relationships and all of these things. So yeah, it's absolutely headed that way. It's already, I mean, we've gone beyond, I've said this before, we've gone beyond normalizing it. We've gone into glamorizing it. I mean, just last year or the year before last with Balenciaga having that ad campaign with the kids passed out in the bondage gear. And then the thing about pedophilia, it's like, who is your audience you're trying to communicate with, right? Like, there is some sort of weird bond between the super high elite and child exploitation. Just 1,000%. That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, just as something with like ties into the whole Dylan thing too, is in like, remember the time before we would psychoanalyze ourselves so much, like when we were still like kids or teenagers and stuff, and we weren't analyzing like every damn part about ourselves, you know, that like freedom where you're just kind of like living uninhibitedly. Why would we want to remove that at younger and younger ages for children? Because as soon as you introduce gender identity to them, that's going to put them into a self-analyzing tailspin. You know, like, why do you want them to be so hyper-analytical? I mean, these are moms raising their kids now at like 2 years old, being like, are you a boy or a girl today? That's insane. Like, who knows what that kid will even grow up as? Like, just the psychological damage of that is enough, I think, you know, but then your 90% of them will go on to take hormones and medicalization. So no, it's super dangerous. Like, why are we trying to corrupt the innocence of children, period? You know, like, kids don't care about that kind of stuff. They really don't. And all they care about for the most part is like approval from their parents and approval from their friends and other adults in their life. So if every adult in their life, or most adults in their life, are telling them, you know, oh, you're special, but you're born in the wrong body, your friends might not understand, blah, blah, blah. Kids attached to that kind of stuff, they'll take that and run with it because you just gave them an identity to hold on to. You know, they're all trying to figure out who the hell they are. So yeah, it's super dangerous. And that's why that ties into the Dylan thing, because Dylan's audience is vastly young and he's glamorizing the entire transit, all of the, literally from day one, glamorizing transition, period, you know, and trying to glamorize trans periods, which is funny. But yeah, so that's why I think it's dangerous. I think if that music video came out like a year and a half ago, it probably would have been so much more popular. I thought it was going to have like a couple million views by now, and it's not even to 1 million yet. So I think people stopped caring, or are not going to care as much about him and his influence, hopefully. But it's kind of too late anyway. He already got his audience, you know? Like, I wonder how many young people decided to transition after being exposed to Dylan Mulvaneys content, you know?
Just for our audience, I don't have a problem with transgender. I just have a problem with at one point, or at which point is it not healthy anymore and it's getting poisonous for the children. Because when you're 18, 21, it's your decision what you want to be, but it's not that easy when you are 10, 15, 16. That's the part when your hormones just start exploding and you don't really know what's going on in your body. And I think this big tech, big pharma, all those organizations and companies, they use this innocence and this confusion for their profit. And this is the part what I think is not okay.
Absolutely. No, it's really, really gross, because it's just become this huge money-making scheme that, I mean, like, try and stop it now, you know? Like, people have so much invested into it now. People have their kids going down this pipeline. Now they have money invested into this. They have entire careers invested into it. So it's not going anywhere for a while. But I think that there's at least a good kind of, like, the pendulum is starting to swing back a little bit. Like, people are maybe shaking off the insanity of 2020 because it made everybody crazy, you know? And hopefully it seems like people are kind of coming back to a place of like, okay, let's just be logical about this. We can't all be racist, transphobe, Nazis. You know what I mean? Like, maybe some of these people have a point, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I like exactly what you said. I think that's a great way to end it, is that we should, when we're making these arguments, we need to be focused on the health and safety of the child, right? Like, we are concerned with that very trans child's well-being and safety and health. That's what we care about. So it's not just coming from an ideological point of view, like, oh, you're all evil or it's all wrong, blah, blah, blah. No, it's coming from a point of view that we want what's best for that kid too. You just happen to think differently, you know? How is it? We should always err like doctors. The Socratic oath that they take is, first, do no harm. you know? That's the first rule of being a doctor. You literally sign that before you become a doctor, is you first do no harm. Most of these doctors are not fulfilling that at all. They're creating harm and removing fully healthy and functioning body parts and ruining these kids' future. So yeah, I think you made a good point by we need to we care about the health and safety of the kids and just not tearing families apart, you know?
Yeah. So one last question, because in Britain, they now stopped handing out hormone-changing medications to children. So do you think that would be a start in America too? That they say, okay, at one specific age, gonna hand them out because this child or this teenager or this young adult is old enough and has the brain and the mental adolescence and is aware of what this person is going through with this
Right.
with this transfer into another sex.
I mean, of course, I think that would be brilliant for it to happen in the US. I don't think it will, though, because we have too many states that are going to be using that as a civil rights issue, you know, and using it for like elections and all of that. But I mean, the irony of it, it's interesting because in my state, I worked last year to help gather signatures for these 6 initiatives, one of them being parental notification. So if something happens in your child's school or they go by a different pronoun, the parents have to know within 48 hours. Because right now, the law was parents don't have to know anything, right? Which is so dangerous because you admit that trans people commit suicide at a higher rate, and then you're not telling the parent that their child is trans. Like, that's crazy. That's a risk to the child. So we just had this initiative pass, and originally, like this time last year, every single Democrat voted against it, right? They were like, no, the parents don't have a right. Like, we're trying to protect the trans child because maybe the parents don't accept them, can't affirm them, blah, blah, blah. And then a lot of stuff has happened since then. A lot of stories have been made, media posts, all of this stuff. And now it got we got enough signatures on it, enough Washington state residents wrote on it, 400,000, I believe, or got 400,000 signatures. Enough of them got signed that it's becoming law. It had to become law, and our House had to vote on it. Turns out every single Democrat voted for it now. They've changed because it's an election year, right? And they can't be so crazy to be like, yes, we're going to take your kids away from you and not tell you where they are and blah, 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 because they know that's extremely, extremely radical. But so now they're changing. So there is some kind of shift. I just hope it's not just because of the election season. And I hope it's because we're actually changing people's minds now. So that's what I can hope for the future.
So do you have anything to say for the audience, what you think would be also important to run that interview up and find a closing?
Yeah, I would say it's important to support and share the people that are actually not afraid to like speak up, because there are sacrifices that are made for it, you know, like my full last name was published by the Washington State Democrats, who are very, very powerful in this state. It's a very blue state, you know, the Republicans are a joke, but I mean, they're not. I love them, but they need to learn how to win more. But so I would say support people where you can. Don't be afraid to be honest and speak the truth, but try to come from a place of compassion and come from a place of like empathy and care. We kind of have to use their own language against them now, you know, because they've painted anybody who disagrees with them as just heartless and soulless and doesn't only cares about like money or cares about tradition or something. No, it's like, you guys are so ideologically involved, you don't realize you're hurting these children, or you do and you don't care. So I would recommend that people try to come at it from a place of compassion, empathy for the victims and for the children, not for the perverts or anything. But also, I would say, be careful. We need to be a little bit more specific on who we're calling pedophiles. You can say something is pedophilic, but we shouldn't call everybody a pedophile, because then the word just won't mean anything anymore. And it'll be how the Democrats used racist for 10 years. And now nobody gives a shit if you get called a racist, you know? So it's like, we have to be, I call people pedophiles that are pedophiles, you know, or groomers that are groomers. But I try to be careful to give even that very person, like let's say it's a teacher who thinks they're doing the right thing by introducing like LGBT sexual concepts to their children, we need to be able to give them the opportunity to realize they're wrong and come back, right? Because if we only just castigate them as this evil thing and just say, oh, you're just a part of this and you're just evil, blah, blah, they're not going to listen. They're never going to change their mind. They're just going to be like, you guys are crazy. I'm not going to be with you guys. You know, I may as well be with the people not calling me pedophiles, you know? So it's like, I think we just need to be a little bit more strategic and smart with that, with the organizations that do that kind of stuff. So okay. I think that would be beneficial.
That would, I am totally agreeing with you in that point. So then thank you so much for being on the show and giving your opinion about this topic, what I think is very important. And yeah, I hope I can invite you again for another interesting talk.
I would love that. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me, Vicky. It was awesome.
So, das war das Interview mit David Kitsak und ich hoffe, ihr habt eine gute Aufklärung erhalten und ihr könnt mir in euren Kommentaren eure Meinung schreiben, wie ihr das mit dem Musikvideo seht, ob das jetzt gar nicht so schlimm ist, dass ich da eher übertreibe oder ihr meiner Meinung seid. Lasst einen Like und subscribe bei uns und vielen Dank für eure Aufmerksamkeit und schaltet doch wieder ein beim nächsten USA-Report. Dankeschön.